Okay, so I think it's a good time to get started. We know that there will be some people joining us a bit later, but it's important to start on time. So welcome everyone to the University of Cambridge Postgraduate Virtual Open Days 2025. We are very excited to be hosting this webinar because it's to present information about a new master's program here at the university, which is our Masters of Philosophy, our MPhil in Digital Policy. My name is Melissa Abache. I will be facilitating the session. And our speaker today is Dame Professor Diane Coyle. She will introduce herself in more detail. I will be giving you a very short sort of housekeeping information to make sure the session runs smoothly. We will have 45 minutes for the session. We will have a presentation from Professor Coyle, and then it will be followed by a live question and answer session. To ask your questions, please type them on the Q&A function or button that you should be able to see on your screens, whether you're joining us from a mobile device or from a laptop or computer. You can also upvote the questions that you want to answer. So that way we will know the most popular questions and we will try to answer as many as we can. We should have approximately 15 to 20 minutes to answer questions. There may be some that we're going to mark as answered in case they are not relevant to the session today. But please know that throughout the week and next week, we will be having webinars that are related to topics such as choosing a college, funding, for example, providing your English proficiency, documentation, and evidence. So we have a whole range of topics about the application process that are available to you to watch in case you cannot join live. So we're going to try to use the most of the time that we have today to answer your questions about the program itself in terms of the courses, professors, career paths, and everything else you may want to know about the department where this master program sits, which is our Department of Public Policy. So without further ado, I'm going to now hand over the virtual floor to Professor Coyle to introduce herself and the Masters in Digital Policy. Thank you so much, Professor Coyle.
Thank you, Melissa, for that introduction. And hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. So this is very exciting for me, first of all, because this course is brand new, but also because it's in a brand new department in Cambridge, the Bennett School of Public Policy. We only just launched. We have as a sort of motto, the right kind of growth fairly shared, and clearly with a focus on what governments and others can do to make citizens' lives better. And so we have just been founded out of a research institute, the Bennett Institute, previously in the politics department here in Cambridge. But now we're an independent department. We run an MPhil in public policy, which some of you might have listened to the earlier webinar on that course. That's been running for about 12 years. So this new course is an MPhil in digital policy. And most of the time I spend talking to you today, we'll be talking about the aims and structure of that course. Let me start by saying a few words about myself. I'll be the course director. I'm the research director of the Bennett School of Public Policy. And for many years, my research has concerned the digital economy and the measurement questions around the digital economy. I've had a long career in public service. I started my career at the UK Treasury. I've worked in areas such as the governance of the BBC, Natural Capital Committee, measuring natural capital. I'm currently on the government's Industrial Strategy Advisory Council. And so my own career has always linked policy and the research that informs policy development. So we're launching the MPhil in Digital Policy starting next autumn. And it's a postgraduate course that's designed to equip policy professionals with the technical and professional training needed to address the very complicated digital technology and policy issues. Importantly, it's interdisciplinary because the kinds of questions, the kinds of problems that emerge around digital technology and AI and increasingly other new technologies like quantum need technical knowledge as well as an understanding of the policy process and the political environment. And so we bring together the relevant disciplines to give that rounded perspective on problems. It means that students can come from a range of different disciplinary backgrounds themselves, be it computer science, political science, economics, law, engineering. And the course is obviously aimed at addressing a perceived shortage of policy professionals who have the capability to address these very technically complicated digital challenges in government. What we find in engaging with civil servants, with policy professionals, is that there are some people who've got very deep technical knowledge, but they're quite small in number compared to the number and complexity of the policy challenges that emerge at the moment. So let me just say a little bit about entry requirements. Like other MPhils, applicants have to have demonstrate a high academic standard, which is a high 2.1 in the UK system, or a minimum GPA of 3.75 in the US system. We typically like students to have a couple of years of professional experience, although that's not a hard and fast rule. Some have more, and a few people on the course, the other MPhil course, come straight from undergraduate degrees. But typically a little bit of professional experience. Before the course starts, we will be providing online optional materials to introduce some technical aspects to people who don't have a technical background, and to introduce some policy aspects to people who have the technical background but less of the policy experience. That will all be entirely optional for people to help prepare themselves. So let me go on to the course structure. There are 3 terms, as in Cambridge: Michaelmas, Lent and Easter. Michaelmas term, there are 4 core modules, 3 of which will be formally assessed. The other will be assessed or taught through exercises that take place in class. And so the first one is Government and Politics in the Digital Era, which is a course looking at how governments make decisions in the context of extremely rapid technological change. Looks also at how digital technologies and AI are reconfiguring state power, citizenship, democracy, and such questions. So it's a political science flavored course, if you like, but very much informed by the way that the technologies are changing the political environment and the possibilities for government. The second core module is the first digital economics course. I will be teaching that next year. I am an economist by background and have been studying the digital economy since the mid-1990s. So this will be about the basic economics of how digital markets operate, why digital technology changes the structures of organizations and the way that markets operate, introduces new business models such as platform business models, and the key issues in economic regulation and policy around digital. It won't be technical. The course should be understandable, accessible to people who are not themselves economists. And so there will always be further reading for those who want to get into things in more technical depth, but the course itself will not be highly technical. Third module in Michaelmas term will be policy analysis, and that will focus on the way that the common frameworks for discussing and analysing policy choices. How do officials think about framing the policy choices available to the political decision makers? How do they think about evaluating evidence? How should policymakers engage with experts, and so on? And then the final one will be data science in R or Python for policymakers. And for people who already have a lot of coding experience, that's obviously less relevant, but it will have applications of coding and the basics of accessing and using data, visualizing data, using generative AI models, and addressing some key issues such as how do you even define the data that you use? How is that constructed? What are the biases? What are the missing data? And so this will be a kind of basic introduction for people who don't have that coding experience, but actually covers some very important issues, even for people who do have more technical experience, that are not always covered in technical courses of this kind. So that's the Michaelmas term. Lent term also 4 modules, 3 of them assessed formally through written assessments, and another one assessed through exercises in class. First of all, with the second digital economics module. That will cover more the regulatory and policy issues. So market dynamics, market power, competition policy, and how do those kinds of choices affect innovation, productivity, and growth. That's going to be taught by Professor Hayanid Aman, who is a new member of staff and is a former trade negotiator, former competition lawyer, and so has vast practical experience of the applications of economics in those kinds of policy questions. Second module will be using digital technologies and AI in the public sector. And this is looking specifically at issues like using digital to improve productivity efficiency in the public services, but also how does that interact with governance and accountability frameworks? What does it mean to be automating decisions that can have a high impact on citizens' lives? How can it be used to improve quality as well as save costs in the public sector, and so on? A third module will be about governance for responsible AI, which is going to address the AI governance debates that no doubt many of you will already be aware of, much discussed in the media. So looking more broadly at regulatory frameworks and how governments can ensure the responsible deployment of AI in ways that serve the needs of their own country. And then finally, there'll be a course on professional skills for policymakers, which is core skills such as communication, the different kinds of formats for writing, presenting data, importantly, and also communicating what can be quite technical issues to a wider audience of policymakers, working with media, working with social media. So a standard set of professional skills for policymakers, but again, in the context of the digital technology. So those 2 terms are taught modules. The final term will be spent working on an independent research paper of up to 15,000 words, so reasonably substantive dissertation. The candidate will propose the research question. They may, if they want to, set up some kind of external experience with a digital company, for instance, or a policy division to inform that research. There'll be a lot of flexibility in what the questions are, what the research methods are, and how that is approached. Every student will have a supervisor who will meet them at least 3 times a term to discuss the courses, but also their preparation for and work on this independent research paper. In addition, there will be non-assessed public policy masterclasses. These will probably be shared with our other program, the MPhil in Public Policy. So that will be a program of talks, external mentors or workshops with policy practitioners and experts. One of the great advantages we have at Cambridge is that we're able to bring in a lot of fantastic speakers from outside who can share their experience with our students. So that's the broad outline of the courses, and you may have other more detailed questions about them, which I'm very happy to talk about when we get to the questions. Just to reiterate on the assessment, so 6 of the modules will be assessed by an essay of up to 3,000 words. I say essay, some of these may be worksheets or other kinds of assessments instead, but they will be formally assessed. There will be the research paper, 10,000 to 15,000 words. We double mark those, so it's a kind of gold standard assessment of that piece of work. Then we have the 2 modules, the data science and the professional skills, which are assessed through in-class exercises and presentations. As with our other course, the pass mark 60%, distinction requires 75%, and students need to pass each one of the assessed components to obtain their degree. So that's sort of a description of what it will be. I want to say a little bit about what the aim is and what we would like students to emerge from this course with. We do get extremely varied groups of students. They come from all over the world, and they come from all kinds of different professional and disciplinary backgrounds. This is a real strength because that means that everybody who attends gets exposure to the perspectives and experience of an incredibly able cohort from around the world. And if you like, on top of that experience, we are aiming for students to be able to have a really rich, deep understanding of the political and technical context for policy decisions in these areas of very complex technical challenges. We want students to have a clear grasp of what the policy issues are in this domain. We want them to have basic skills, whatever their background, in understanding data deeply, understanding how it's created, where it comes from, what its biases are, and in data science and visualization. More fundamentally, if you like, we want people to have critical thinking skills, and I suppose this is true of every graduate course in Cambridge. This is a very technical area. It's a very rapidly changing domain of policy. And so understanding how to think about it, that critical understanding is fundamentally important. And then we want people to have core professional skills, communication skills, professional ethics, and the ability to navigate long, successful careers in public service. As I said at the start, we are directly addressing an acknowledged lack of digital know-how, technical know-how in government and the public sector. There are some people who've got deep understanding. Many civil servants, many policymakers do not have that kind of know-how. And so the graduates from this course will have very specific knowledge and skills, but also a broad interdisciplinary and critical approach, and will be highly employable. The demand for people who understand what's happening in digital, in AI, now in quantum technologies as well, is only going to go up. The employability, the career paths of our alumni from MPhil in public policy are very impressive, and there's no reason at all to think this will be any different. Our graduates expect to find jobs in government and public bodies, but also international organizations, central banks, think tanks, regulatory roles in business as well. Obviously, the tech companies themselves are large employers of people who've got economic experience, regulatory experience, and so on. And so that, I think, is another rationale for your interest in this course. So that's what I wanted to say by way of introduction. I can see we have some questions already, so I'm going to stop now, and we've got about 20 minutes, I think, for Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Coyle. That's a great overview of the program. And yes, we've had some great questions coming in already. So I will start by reading them. Just as a reminder, please have a look at the Q&A box on your screen, because since we already have some questions, there may be some there that you are also interested in. So if you click on the little thumbs up icon on the left-hand side, then we will know that this is a popular let's say, a question that more than one person is interested in. If I just start in terms of the order they were asked, the first one is, how can the subject matter of the MPhil in digital policy be differentiated with the MPhil in digital humanities or the MPhil in technology policy, which are two other programs that we offer?
Good question. The digital humanities is, as it indicates, very much more focused on using digital techniques for areas of study in the humanities. And so the area of study there is very different from the one that we're offering. We're looking at questions relevant to public policy. They're looking at questions relevant to humanities studies. The MPhil in technology policy, there is a little bit of overlap. They do focus on digital to some extent, but there are also areas of technology that they cover that we don't. In future, we will be looking with them at developing options for students. As we launch, we're not going to have optional courses, but across the university, there's an ambition to add options later. So there's a little bit of overlap, but again, if you look in detail at the modules, they actually cover different sets of questions.
And I would think, I think I've also read a bit about the technology policy. They would be looking at other technology areas as well, for example, in agricultural technology, so not necessarily only digital kind of technology policy management or analysis. So I think you have answered the second question, which is what is the offering of courses and who is teaching them. So I will mark that as an answer. And of course, you can find all of the detailed information on the program website in the Department of Public Policy website. In terms of the application process, there is a question here about the references that students have to submit or applicants have to submit. So is it preferred to submit 2 academic references and only substitute one with a professional reference if a second academic reference is not available? Or more broadly, what reference combination is most strongly recommended?
There's no universal answer to that. We obviously read all the references very carefully. And I think if you're selecting referees, you would want to find people who are most able to talk about your strengths and your interests, why this course would benefit you. And so I don't think there is a preferred option. It's down to the individual and the people who know them and would write informatively about their suitability for the course.
Okay, great. The other question is about what is the expected size of the first cohort? How many students do you expect to admit in the first cohort?
We're expecting about 20 in the first cohort, which will make it about half the size or a bit less of the existing MPhil in public policy.
Okay. There is a question which is very common, and it's about the funding deadline. So I can also explain this a little bit, but the question is, there is a funding deadline different from the course application deadline. So if an applicant must submit both their degree, their academic admission or application and the funding application at the funding deadline to be eligible, or can they submit only their funding application and then continue with the program application, which the deadline is 2026. So very briefly to say, please submit your applications by the funding deadline. Essentially, the funding deadline means that anyone who has submitted their application to the program by that date, which is typically early December every year, they will be considered for any eligible funding that the university can offer centrally, or that the department can offer, or even that some colleges are able to offer. So this is why we emphasize that you try to submit as early as possible by the funding deadline. In terms of what that funding application comprises of, it's very simple. It's already inside the main program application form. There is a section called funding. You just have to tick a few boxes. The most important one is saying, yes, I want to be considered for any eligible funding. And then it will show you, based on the information you provided earlier about your citizenship, gender, age, and so on, and other characteristics, the program you're applying to, then it's going to show you which bits of funding in terms of bursaries, grants, scholarships you would be considered for. Okay, so it's not an extra form that you have to complete, it's part of the application form. So I hope that answers this question for everyone who is interested. So the question about the level of professional experience. So would you say this program is aimed at mid-career professionals, someone with approximately 8 to 10 years of experience and looking to move from social impact implementation to policy making, for example, as a profile of a candidate?
So I think that I would say, and here I'm drawing on the experience of the MPhil in public policy, we don't have a typical profile. So we do say typically we're looking for early career policy professionals, so people who've had maybe 2 to 5 years of experience, but there are always exceptions to that. People come from different kinds of backgrounds as well, so some might have been in government or in a central bank previously. Others are looking to change direction in their careers, they've had some other kind of experience and they want to pivot into a policy career. And equally, people do go on to a wide range of different activities afterwards, as I was saying. So they might go back to jobs in government or central banking. They might go to an international organization, or they might go into a business job. So I guess one of the merits of this kind of course is that it can be used as a turning point in your career if you do want to do something different. Equally, it is a way of upskilling if you want to get your career onto an ambitious trajectory without changing direction. So I think the median is probably that 2 to 5 years of experience, but there are always exceptions, either a few who've just come from undergraduate degrees or a few who've had longer experience in public service.
Okay, thank you. There was another question similar to that about somebody with over 30 years of professional experience, 8 of them in the public sector. So again, there isn't a kind of hard rule of you can't or you can't. It will be about the entire kind of application package and information that it's presented to the admissions committee, right? Okay.
Exactly right.
Okay, so another question is, I'm most interested in the course called Using Digital to Improve Productivity or Efficiency in the Public Services. So I guess I'll rephrase it. So I think the person asking the question, it's whether the masters would help them to achieve that, to use digital technologies to improve productivity or efficiency in the public services.
So yes, there's one module that's specifically about that, and it's about improving productivity and efficiency, but also quality. And at the same time, how do you preserve accountability, make sure there are no unintended consequences of using digital in public sector decision making? So there's that specific module. And also, I think all of the modules will speak to exactly this kind of question about what does it mean to be in government, in public service, and making use of these kind of extraordinary new technologies, which offer great potential, but also, as we have seen, some social costs as well. And the staffing at the moment is, I'm course leader. I'll be teaching the first economics course. We've got 2 assistant professors who have recently joined. Dr. Alexei Turabov is one. He's a computational social scientist with a background in security and political science. And Dr. Hayani Daman, who, as I mentioned before, is a former competition lawyer, trade negotiator, and has most recently been in one of the digital labs at the University of Toronto. We will have 2 more members of staff who will be joining, hopefully early next year. And then we have a kind of teaching cohort across the 2 courses. And so it's a really highly qualified, multidisciplinary teaching team. And the other thing I want to add is that our philosophy of teaching is that we bring our research into the teaching. And so the courses change all the time because the questions change, the research that we are doing changes. We have a lot of engagement with the public sector. We bring in policymakers to address the students as well. So it's a very dynamic environment. And I should say, if anybody has suggestions for us for this brand new course, I'm very happy to take them here. Tell us what you wanted to cover.
Okay. A very quick question about who is teaching the module on digital technologies and AI in the public sector?
Not assigned yet, so I don't know which member of staff that will be.
Okay. And so a similar question, do you accept recent graduates with no work experience? So I think we have answered that, you know, it depends on their profile, and it's preferable if they have a couple of years of experience, but there's, you know, in the public policy masters, I guess there have also been, well, that's more aimed at recent graduates. So, okay. The other question is, do any of the proposed modules include topics such as digital rights or the threats that digital technologies pose to the rule of law and civil society in authoritarian settings?
That kind of question would come into the module on responsible AI. So responsible AI is one of those broad definitions, but it does cover what are the societal implications of the technology, both the use of the technology and its development in the private economy and markets, and its use by governments as well. So, so the short answer is yes, and it would come into that module in the Lent term.
Okay, Another question, is the master focused on UK policy, EU policy, or more global policy?
So I think this is an inherently global subject. And so Dr. Turoboff, who I was just talking about, has most recently been looking at the development of AI policy across Asia and looking at the trends in that and how that compares and contrasts with the kind of discussion about AI policy in the United States or in the European Union. So it will be global. And I think that's just inherently so. You know, having said that, given that it's informed by our own research, some of that research will be more oriented towards the UK and the EU because that's what we have experience in. But I don't think you can think about digital and AI in a purely national context at all. And so it will be global.
Okay, now we have a few questions that are more procedural. So I'm going to guide those people to please check our postgraduate study website because the answers are there. I will mention where. So when it comes to waiving the English language requirement, because for example, you have done another master's degree in the UK, typically, yes, that's considered enough proof of English proficiency, but the details are written on our website on the English proficiency page. Then whether it's, if you have graduated many years ago, if it's acceptable for the recommendation letters to come from two professional referees rather than an academic referees. Again, on our website, we do have a guide in terms of the number of years you have been out of academia or when you finish your most recent higher education degree in terms of when it's acceptable to submit to professional referees. If it's many, many years ago, then typically, yes, that's the rule for the university is that do you want to, I think you already answered this, Professor Coyle, so let's move on. Would having already completed a master's degree be an advantage or a disadvantage when applying to this program?
I think that depends. I think that depends on why this course is of interest and what your account is of what your motivation for doing it is and where you think it might take you. And so we would assess each application separately. I mean, as you said before, Melissa, we take the whole package of application materials in the round, read them and discuss them very carefully because it's important to us, not only that we get great students, but that we think the course is going to serve their needs well and that the group as a whole will work as a cohort.
Okay, all right. In terms of the professional reference, can it be from a colleague or it needs to be from a senior or line manager? What's your view on this based on the public policy, perhaps cohorts?
It's quite hard to answer that one in the abstract. I think in general, it's probably better if it's from somebody more senior, but that's just common sense, I think.
Okay, very good question. Deadline to submit the application. You can find this on the program website. Just for quick reference, the funding deadline is December 2nd. So you have about, well, less than a month now. And the course application deadline is February 26th. In case you don't need funding, you have other funding sources and you still want to apply. Let's answer this. Because one of the requirements is to submit a writing sample or an essay on a specific policy issue, can they be co-author or published pieces, or would you prefer non-published and single kind of author essay?
I think published pieces would be fine. If it's co-authored, it's obviously harder to assess the skills of the individual who's making the application. So I think preferable to find something single authored. But I don't think there's any reason for it not to be a published piece.
Okay. And then I think a very good question, what are the research topics that the school or department is excited to support students with?
So let me talk a bit about our current research for the members of the cohort who are in place already. As I said, I'm an economist and I'm also a member of the government's Industrial Strategy Advisory Council here in the UK. And so my interest at the moment is in understanding what kinds of economic policies governments, no matter where they are, should be adopting to make the technology work for their country, to improve living standards, improve public services, and so on. And so that's looking at a range of questions. How can governments introduce policies that enable startup companies to grow? what innovation policies do they need? What's the interaction between supporting companies and having an effective competition policy for digital markets and AI? And I'm also looking at measurement questions as well. How do we know if AI is proving as transformative as all of the hype suggests it is? And what other kinds of indicators might we be looking at, including energy use and water use for all the data centers. So that's the kind of research I'm doing at the moment. I just yesterday submitted a big grant application on AI and industrial policy, and how that changes the way that we should be thinking about economic policy in general, because for many years, industrial policy and supply side policies have not been in fashion in economics or in policy environments. Dr. Turabov is looking at the geopolitics of AI. He's looking at the way that different regions and different countries are developing their AI policies, and how this does or does not play into the kind of narrative that there's an arms race going on. The short answer being that the arms race narrative is very much driven by the two large digital economies, which are America and China. And so how are what people call middle powers navigating their way through that? Dr. Darman is looking at the way that trade policies and tariffs and technology company lobbying are starting to converge, and how policymakers should be thinking about bringing together what have been very separate domains of policymaking. Competition policy, trade policy, industrial policy have all been in separate silos in government, and now we need to think about them together. So that's the individual members of staff. But more broadly, there's just a huge range of interesting research questions at the moment. And so one might think about, for example, applying algorithmic decision-making in any specific domain of policymaking. What data is needed? What data is being used? What are the consequences? One of my previous students on the other master's program looked at the use of AI in ranking patients for medical treatments, and the way that that changes quite substantially if you change the data that's given to the algorithm in doing this ranking. So there's a really wide range. And I love supervising students because I learn so much about the whole waterfront of research and policy from their very varied interests. So the research projects that people do, the dissertations, will not have to be linked to our own personal research agendas at all. They can be much broader than that.
Okay. Another question related to the writing sample, and this is also explained on the program website. Is the writing sample expected to focus specifically on a digital policy topic, or can it address a broader public policy issue?
It could address a broader issue. I mean, the point of the writing sample is to enable us to assess the individual's ability to structure an argument, to write clearly, to express themselves and communicate. So it could be broader.
Okay, great. And then the last two questions that we have, and right on time because we have about 5 minutes we have before we wrap up. It's about application fee, and so that one is the application fee charge per course. So if you apply for two programs, for example, the MPhil in public policy and another one, do they need to pay £85 for each? I just checked very briefly on the website, and it's per application. So that indicates to me that yes, it's for each, but if I'm wrong, please forgive me. But you can, of course, send us an email and we will clarify that. I will put on the chat our email address where you can contact us for information from the postgraduate admissions office. And the other question was if there's any tuition initial deposit required for the master's. No, typically we don't ask for a deposit for any of our master's programs. And more information about when you're expected to make your first tuition payment, it's also available on our website. So
may I just add, Melissa, on that first question there, that if we get applicants to the MPhil in public policy, we may direct them to the MPhil in digital policy if it looks like their interests are much more relevant. So I think that would only be the one application fee.
Okay, all right. So that's good then. But it would be good for people to decide beforehand which program is a better fit for their specific learning goals and career goals. Okay, so I've just pasted on the chat the Bennett School website, which is Bennett with double T school.cam.ac.uk. You will then find the section on study and then all of the details about the MPhil in digital policy. There's also an email address that you can find there in the contact us section, and a very good frequently asked questions page where I'm sure all of the more kind of smaller details about the application process, you will find an answer to that. So with that, we're going to be closing the session today, thanking all of you for joining us, and of course to Professor Coyle for giving a great overview of the program. It's all very exciting because we know this is where a lot of future leaders in lots of different countries around the world are going to be receiving their initial training in this kind of new world that we have of digital policy making. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We wish you a good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are joining us from, and keep in touch if you have any further questions. Thank you so much. And just a final reminder, this has been recorded. You will receive the recording via email within a week, and you will also be able to see the recording on our postgraduate study website under the postgraduate virtual open days. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Coyle. Have a great day ahead. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.